So with that, I would like to introduce and welcome Clara Deser at NCAR and Keith Rodgers from Princeton. Clara and Keith are the co-chairs for our new working group that's just getting started as of March of this year on large initial condition Earth System Model Ensembles. And so they've had a quite bit of a flurry of activities so far in their first few months, and they're going to tell us a little bit about what they've done so far and a lot about what their plans are for the next 3 years. So thank you for joining us today, Clara and Keith, and please take it from here.
Okay, thanks very much. Hi, everyone. So Keith and I are going to tag team on this. I'll present the first part, and then Keith will present the second part. So Kristen asked us to just tell a bit about, the main goals of the working group, and then some of the activities that we've already been doing in this, the last few months, and then what the future plans are. So the overarching goal is to facilitate the study of climate change in the presence of internal climate variability, primarily through Earth system models, but also an activity that relates to observations. Let's see, I just have to get my cursor. Okay, here we go. So, and we emphasize that, the importance and value of this to all disciplines within climate sciences, and just highlighting a few of the applications or that, are important here. So first, if we have enough simulations with a given climate model, where the external forcing applied is identical, and they just start from perturbed initial conditions. That allows, by averaging those simulations, you can reduce the contribution from internal variability, which can be quite large on even multi-decadal timescales, and especially on regional scales, i.e. less than continental. So that averaging process allows for better identification of the anthropogenic climate change signal. Another utility of these large ensembles with individual models is that it provides a lot of data, which is really needed to look at extreme events, which of course are rare by definition. And so if one has, many simulations, one has better statistics on extreme events and how they may change with climate change. Also, in terms of comparing models with one another, it really enables a much more robust way of comparing models, not only their simulation of internal variability, but also how they respond to external forcing. And that response can also include changes in the characteristics of the internal variability itself. And then another important component here is that it allows, and many people have used these large ensembles as a robust test bed for methodologies where we want to, of course, understand the real world. So we only have one trajectory, one realization of nature, and so we can test our methodologies with large ensembles where we know the forced response, and we can see how close we get to that forced response with these methodologies in any single simulation. It also, emergent constraints is a very important component, again, allowing for a test bed using these sort of perfect model simulations, and many other things that can be done. So just important to across the climate sciences that these large ensembles are really important. Okay, so the outcomes as we stated them in the prospectus, and maybe this will be modified to some extent depending on the working group members and our discussions. But at this point, our outcomes are the following. We're working towards actually an initial publication that's aimed at communicating the utility of these large ensembles and insights that one can gain from large ensembles, where we're using an existing suite we have 7 models to date that have more than 20 ensemble members for historical and future. And this publication, we're envisioning, we're sort of drafting an outline as we go through our discussions on the telecons, and we're aiming it very broadly. And maybe the climate dynamics community, this is a little bit now familiar territory, but really for many other aspects of climate science, ocean biogeochemistry, air quality, you name it, ecology, the word really, I think, hasn't gotten out, and so we'd like to really target those communities as well. And this publication, we definitely want to make the deadline where it can be cited or used as a reference in the IPCC, the next report. We have one working group member, John Fife, who's the lead author on for working group 5 in the AR6 report. And he's saying, and I've heard also from others, that large ensembles are going to play a very visible role in the next IPCC report in at least a couple of chapters. And he thought that it would be very important and very relevant to get this publication out so that it can be cited in the report. So that was very nice to hear. Another major outcome is that we want to make the data from the existing suite of large ensembles that we know about easily accessible by anyone, the broad research community. And we're doing that. We have secured funding actually from NSF, where we're supporting a half-time person whose also on the working group, Flavio Lehner, and his task is to actually collect a broad set of variables from these large ensembles, and we have a dedicated data storage device. And we're going to follow sort of the CESM1, model for how to really make these data just easy to access, in time series format, because I think that was a really important component of the success of the CESM1 large ensemble. So that's, I feel, a really important aspect of the working group, again, to get people using the data who might otherwise have trouble. And then another outcome that we have proposed is to lead or to discuss and then to lead, a protocol, best practices for a coordinated large ensemble MIP in quotes, because this is not going to be a formal CMIP 6 MIP, where, obviously beyond that timeline, but modeling groups who, at the end of all their dedicated experiments, those that then have some computing resources left over in the out years between IPCC deadlines, that they may choose to follow this protocol. So then for the first time, we'll actually have, the identical experimental design. Right now, what we have is the suite of large ensembles. They've all been initialized in somewhat different ways, different starting years, different future RCP scenarios. So it's a little bit of a mix and match. So it would be very nice, if the community is behind this, that we follow the same experimental design. And then also protocol for, strategic data storage and data access, so that, again, these large ensembles can be easily used by the broad research community. And then the fourth outcome that we proposed was to, not just modeling activity, but to build a community observational large ensemble. And I can talk a little bit about that in the Q&A if you like. But again, using the statistical characteristics of our long observational records, and using those to build, if you will, alternate scenarios of internal variability that could have happened, and then superimposing them on the forced climate change responses given by, any of these model large ensembles or CMIP model ensemble means, et cetera. So that's an activity that we'd like to work on as well. We are, next summer, we've secured the dates for an open science workshop that will be held at NCAR. And again, we'd like to target not just climate dynamics community, but, again, get the word out to other subdisciplines within climate sciences, and also really target early career younger scientists. And we're hoping that maybe we can get a special collection of papers from that workshop published. And we have an AGU session that is now receiving abstracts. And also, we have so many members who are really passionate about education and educating the next crop of graduate students and postdocs on large ensembles and what can we learn from them. And one idea that's been floated is to put in a proposal for the ASP summer colloquium at NCAR for summer of 2020, or if that doesn't work out, maybe we can find another venue. Okay, and then I'll just have two more slides here, and then I'll hand it over to Keith. Organization, so the membership, and I'll give you the list of members, but we really are, emphasized that a diversity of disciplines and career stage and gender balance. And you can see we cross atmosphere, ocean, land, sea ice, atmospheric chemistry, biogeochemistry, air quality. We really strive to get people who are, have expertise in all these areas. And then telecons. So we've actually, I think it's been going extremely well, and I'm just really pleased. So we've been having telecons roughly every 2 weeks since mid-March. And we're structuring this first set of telecons around presentations from every working group member. So everybody has a voice at the table. Keith and I are not, running the show. We're providing, of course, vision and structure, but, it's really the working group members who are, obviously, we're a team here. And so first, because we have such broad interests, we need to get to know each other scientifically. Everybody has been giving sort of a 20-minute-ish presentation on their scientific, recent work, and then ending with what their particular interest is in the working group and what they might contribute to this initial paper, and also all the other activities of the working group. And I just felt it was super important to hear from every single person. Otherwise, these telecons, you don't quite know, it just goes out into the void. You don't know who's listening, and, some people may just dominate and that's not what we want. We have a lot. We have senior people. We have early career people. We want everybody on an equal footing. And I've just been getting great feedback from everyone that they feel like it's really interesting and working extremely well. So far, that seems to be going well. So here's the membership. So we're a big working group. We have 20 members, and this is partly because we wanted to involve, or we needed to involve, the modeling centers that we knew had large ensembles. So we wanted to pick one person from each. And then, of course, all the other working group members who are, present as well. So we have maybe more than the typical share of international members, but that's the reason for that. So they're listed here in alphabetical order, and so I probably don't take the time here to read them, but if you just scan down the list of names and what their positions are, you see a lot of assistant professors, you see some senior scientists, but a lot of younger scientists. And then in terms of what their expertise is in, we really, as you can see, tried to cover, climate dynamics, atmospheric chemistry, air quality, extreme events, polar climate, ocean biogeochemistry, terrestrial processes, detection and attribution. So that's our list of members, and we're about 2/3 of the way through our these individual presentations. So we'll probably wrap up the individual presentations in early October, and then we can really start to structure the telecons to work towards this initial paper in earnest. And I'm hoping that we actually can get a draft done by March of next year. So that would be, the end of the first year of the working group. So that's my goal, our goal for that. Okay, I guess I turn it over to Keith now.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to step us through, moving on to a few more slides here, some overview of what we've covered in the working group discussion so far, and this is just to give you a flavor for the kinds of things that have come up. And so the first slide is emphasizing a little bit more the things that have followed from the individual presentations with the broader discussion we've had towards the end of our working group discussions. So Clara had, I think there are a few slides at the very end that she can come back to, describing her preliminary analyses with multiple models where large ensemble simulations exist, and that really emphasize some of the differences in some of the questions that arise once you start to see the emergence behavior of variables and climate dynamical variables in these models. And so next with one of the external participants, with Claude, he provided an overview of some methodologies from a paper he had in Journal of Climate last year, where there were methods presented for the interpretation of observations. And then Arlene had talked a little bit about some of these questions with atmospheric chemistry, and she had raised the issue of, one of the things she discussed was extreme events, but this had led to some discussion of whether extreme events are something that we can also look at and how we might look at those. Delworth had presented an overview of a bunch of papers that he had published over the last decade, and towards the end of his presentation he shared some of his experience with initialization and spin-up issues, and there was a broad discussion about the issue of how much memory the ocean has. So if you want to start doing your analysis of large ensembles, say in the 1920s, when you might believe that data is useful with reconstructions of SST, for example, how far back do you have to go with your initialization, with with your large ensemble initialization. And so that certainly wasn't resolved during our discussion, but it's something as a question that we will work through together. And then John had pointed to some work he's been doing and some work that I guess is perhaps being published right now on using the Canadian model large ensemble simulations to look at detection and attribution. And so that's another topic which we spend a little bit of time working through. So moving on to the next slide. So Toby had talked about his work to interpret megadroughts continental megadroughts over North America over the last 1,200 years, and some methodological and scientific issues that have come up with his work. And Pedro had talked about equatorial Pacific CO2 fluxes and work he has been actively involved with involving trend detection. So the question of whether our current observing network for ocean CO2, PCO2, and the implication CO2 fluxes, whether over the time scale the existing network has been in place, what kinds of issues exist with trend detection, the force trend. And for the case of the equatorial Pacific, he had suggested that natural variability is significantly important, that the secular trend detection issue is still something that we're not there yet in terms of the duration of the measurement observing system. Isla had talked about some issues with multi-decadal variability over the Atlantic, and some issues involving storm tracks and also involving predictability with different climate dynamical variables. And Nikki Lewandowski had presented in the most recent telecon, I believe, that the issues that she's been looking at with carbon dioxide in the California current region, both in terms of projections, so large ensemble projections, and discussing some ideas she has about how to connect those with predictions. So using the CESM as a consistent model to look at both and to understand how to move forward with that. So some of the issues that have come up that have been about, I think Clara touched on a couple of these, for outreach to the broader scientific community. So Jen Kay had expressed her interest in being involved with some kind of coordinated effort for outreach and for reaching out to early career scientists. And as Clara had mentioned before, John had talked about the interest and the sort of the enthusiasm in the IPCC AR6 process for presenting and applying large ensemble methodologies for a variety of problems. And to be a little bit more specific about Fall AGU, our session proposal was accepted, and we've been reaching out to people from a broad range of subdisciplines, and including, atmospheric chemistry, ocean biogeochemistry, ecology, and as well as climate dynamics and hydrology. So moving on to the next, I jumped ahead. So just as a little bit more detail on the first working group paper to be developed during the coming months, as Clara had described, we're finishing up our presentation stage of our telecons, and we're going to transition directly into our brainstorming and development of the structure and science ideas that we're going to present in the working group paper. And so some of the things that have come out of our discussions are listed here. So an emphasis on cross-cutting applications, large ensembles, separation of forced and natural variability components, so sort of the general, most widely considered application. And then this is something the next topic, exploration review of statistical methods for separating force and internal signals when interpreting observational records. There's a lot of interest in this, and this is a relatively new direction. And I think Clara had said if there's time during the Q&A that we could come back to that. Consideration of emergent constraints, detection, attribution, and extreme events. Optimization of observing system extension, and an example being global biogeochemical Argo. So this is something that's of particular interest to me and the people that I know that are working, to Nikki Nowandowski and to other people who are more directly connected and to Pedro and to the people that are more directly connected to the ocean biogeochemistry side. You know, the idea, just a few words, is I think when the original Argo design was presented to the community, from what I understand, Dean Romick had done a number of statistical calculations with colleagues, and they connected their observing system questions to decadal prediction, and they were able to present quantitatively the needs that they had to do the problem. And I think that it would be of great value if the large ensemble community could make a similar, obviously be a very different argument, but a similar framing of the needs to expand the biogeochemical Argo array. It would be really a really exciting thing to work through. And then finally, that the large ensemble output be applied to drive impact models from a number of people who have expressed interest in this question. So, moving on to the next 12 months. And again, a little bit of this is reiterating what Clara had said before. Specific dates for the workshop are planned for next summer, or almost exactly a year from right now. And that the second item listed here is that the protocols for doing a large ensemble MIP we have a ways to go in terms of working through some of these questions. For example, I mentioned before with Tom Delworth, and I know that Clara has quite a bit of experience in thinking through these issues as well. And the people in Hamburg, the people that are working with the Max Planck Large Ensemble have also brought in a different approach in terms of the way they've done their initialization. And so we are going to have this as an important thing to work through in developing protocols. So I think that would be drawing both on the expertise within the working group as well as people that are not within the working group, because there is a lot of experience that people have developed and a lot of things that aren't necessarily published in terms of mistakes that were made or things that we can learn from. And then listed here as well, again, this issue has come up several times, the observationally based large ensemble. So I think then looking at the next few slides, the next few slides here, maybe if Clara, if you could pick this up then, because these are your results. I will.
So we thought maybe we would just end and leave you with just a couple of concrete, results about why it's important to have large ensembles with different models. And this was picking two slides from my presentation to the working group where we wanted to just really motivate people for why this is really important and all the stuff we can already do with the existing large ensembles, at least to some degree. So what I'm going to show you just as a simple metric is signal to noise of trends over the last 50 years, air temperature and precipitation over North America. This is for the winter season, but we have it for, of course, all the other seasons. And just showing you from the different models, large ensembles that we have to work with, what these look like. And so this is what things look like. So this is air temperature trends in the winter, just linear trends over the last 50 years. So doing that at each grid box and then just showing you the amplitude of the trend. And signal to noise. So signal here is just to take the ensemble mean trend. So that's, hopefully enough members so you can get a good estimate of the externally forced signal. And then noise, just the standard deviation of the trends across the individual members. So just standard signal to noise. And there are 6 maps here. Upper left, you're seeing the Canadian or System Model version 2 50-member ensemble. Then the middle top is the NCAR CSM1 ensemble. And then middle right, GFDL, ESM2M. We now have actually a new ensemble that's just come online with GFDL CM3 that has 20 members, so we'll be able to add that in. And then lower left, 30 members from the IPSL model, 100 members from Max Planck in the middle bottom, and then the right is this observational large ensemble, and the details are in a paper of Karen McKinnon and myself. And it just to show you that signal to noise varies quite a bit across these large ensembles, and it's not just the signal, it's also the noise that varies, so the internal variability. And how do we then validate our models? We need the observed statistics. And so this observational large ensemble is also extremely important. So that's what it looks like for air temperature over North America. Some regions have signal to noise less than 1, according to the NCAR CSM1 model in the northwest part of the continent. And then the final slide is just the same map, but for precipitation. And here, the color bar is changed. So the color bar now for precip only goes up to 2. So we don't have good signal to noise anywhere, or almost nowhere, except right around Hudson Bay for some of the models. But basically, if you're going to try to pick out a forced signal out of, local precipitation in locations in North America, you really don't have, the signal is very small compared to the noise. But the signal to noise varies considerably from one model to another. And, we didn't know this, of course, starting out, and this is why I think it's just incredibly important to get as many people looking at the data, at the output from all these models. So much can be done now, not just using one model's large ensemble, but now finally being able to compare across models. So that's all that Keith and I prepared, and we'd be happy to take questions.